Going from Super Bowl glory to NFL punchline happened in the blink of an eye for the Denver Broncos. After waving goodbye to Peyton Manning in 2015, Broncos country plunged into darkness. 8 seasons without a playoff berth, a parade of quarterback busts, and the nightmare trade that nearly broke the franchise. Fans wondered if they'd ever see the light again. Now, in 2025, with Bo Nix and Sean Payton at the helm, Denver is emerging from the ashes. This is the Denver Broncos Renaissance, a story of how they went from perennial failures to AFC contenders. When the Denver Broncos hoisted the Lombardi Trophy at the end of the 2015 season, nobody was prepared for the drought that followed. Peyton Manning's retirement just a month or so later fired the starting gun on an almighty Hall of Shame carousel of quarterback play. Trevor Siemian, Paxton Lynch, Brock Osweiler, Case Keenum, Joe Flacco, Drew Lock, Brandon Allen, Jeff Driscoll, Brett Rippon, and Teddy Bridgewater all tried and failed to get the team back to winning ways. Despite this miserable hodgepodge of underwhelming talent and short-term solutions, the Broncos never swung for the fences in the draft to try and solve the problem. Drew Lock was the only quarterback of note drafted between 2016 and 2022, and he came in the middle of the second round. Not exactly an area of the draft associated with franchise-altering quarterback play. To make matters worse, the one top 5 selection during this time was spent on Bradley Chubb and not a quarterback. That all went down in 2018, when a certain Josh Allen was taken by the Buffalo Bills 7th overall, just 2 picks after Chubb. Needless to say, John Elway has admitted that passing on Allen for Chubb was the biggest mistake of his GM career.
Oh, he is. And believe me, last year I played with him, and I'm wondering, how long is it going to take him to realize that I passed on him and took Bradley and Chubb instead?
Yeah, it's crazy.
And it took him 2.5 holes to bring it up, and I loved him, right?
Yeah.
But it just,
he was your type.
That's the was my type, and you're right. That was probably my biggest mistake of my GM days, was not taking Josh.
Unsurprisingly, all of this quarterback chaos coincided with a fair bit of coaching turnover as well. Gary Kubiak stepped down a year after his Super Bowl glory, paving the way for Vance Joseph for 2 years, Vic Fangio for 3 years, and Nathaniel Hackett, who didn't even make it through one full season in 2022. Before we get on to him though, we need to introduce General Manager George Paton, who has overseen some of the most pivotal years of this renaissance, which have been far from smooth sailing. Paton was tasked with taking over from Denver icon John Elway ahead of the 2021 season. And it's fair to say his first season in charge was a mixed bag. Despite Vic Fangio having delivered a 12-20 record as head coach, Paton decided to stick with the defensive mastermind. The new GM then delivered a masterclass in his first ever draft, welcoming Pat Surtain into the fold, a certified stud who would go on to win the 2024 Defensive Player of the Year award. Following Surtain into the building was Quinn Miners in the 3rd round and Jonathan Cooper in the 7th round, rounding out a fantastic cohort of talent. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to help Fangio keep hold of his job, predictably offering up another losing season in which Paton also made the controversial move of trading away franchise legend Von Miller, who had admitted to getting frustrated by the persistent losing. Miller immediately reaped the rewards of the move, helping the LA Rams win a Super Bowl later that season. While he was celebrating that, the Broncos were licking their wounds after another failed season, now without their leader on defense and their head coach. After years of quarterback chaos and losing football, the front office and fan base were, unsurprisingly, desperate. It was officially time to reset, coinciding perfectly with new ownership coming to town. The Walton Penner family ownership group snapped up the franchise for a record $4.65 billion. They were quick to point out that putting a winning team on the field was their ultimate priority, which meant working with their GM George Paton to bring in a new head coach and finally take the much-needed big swing at quarterback. The front office was saying all the right things, but actions are what ultimately matter. Nathaniel Hackett was the head coach of choice, having spent the last few years helping Aaron Rodgers win 2 MVPs in his late 30s. Or, at least, that's what we all thought. As it turns out, Aaron deserves all the credit for those awards, as the Hackett experience in Denver was a nightmare. not helped at all by the team's big swing at quarterback, which came in the form of Russell Wilson. Wilson, a 9-time Pro Bowler and former Super Bowl champion with the Seahawks, was viewed as the perfect mix of veteran experience and talent to finally help this team become relevant. So confident and desperate were the Broncos that they gave up 2 first-round picks, 2 second-rounders, a 5th-rounder, QB Drew Lock, defensive lineman Shelby Harris, and tight end Noah Fant to get Wilson, before promptly signing him to a $245 million contract extension that secured his services for 5 additional years. By all accounts, the Denver Broncos had finally found their quarterback, 7 years after the departure of Peyton Manning. Instead, Wilson proved to be far more damaging than any of the other failed journeymen that came before him. He completed a career-low 60% of his passes for 3,524 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. This warranted the lowest QB rating of his career at 38.7, which ranked 27th in the NFL. Not ideal for one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league, but he wasn't the only new Bronco employee who was struggling. The warning signs surrounding head coach Nathaniel Hackett were on full display when he let the clock run down for a 64-yard field goal in Week 1, despite having 3 timeouts in his pocket. These missteps combined with poor performances on the field to produce an overall record of 5-12, with Hackett not surviving the full season. It was the ultimate collapse from optimism when Wilson signed to destruction just 1 year later. Wilson was already looking like a huge waste of money, and with him only 1 year into the mega deal, the future looked bleak. So, the team needed a new savior, one that could navigate an angry and desperate fan base in one of the most painful quarterback contracts of all time. Enter Sean Payton, the man who finally got this lost ship pointing in the right direction. GM George Paton did what he could to bolster the roster. He had found Nick Bonito with his 5th selection in round 2 in 2022, before bringing in Luke Wattenberg, a center, in round 5. Both hold significant roles in the team today. However, all those draft picks on Russell Wilson and Sean Payton meant a class of just 5 players in 2023, headlined by Marvin Mims in the 2nd round. Without a doubt, the best pick of this class has to be cornerback Riley Moss in round 3, who has proven to be a great value and a talented starter across from Surtain. Nevertheless, a team coming off a 5-win season needs more than just 5 rookies to help turn things around. With a tricky task ahead of him, Sean Payton got to work, immediately focusing on the culture and addressing the elephant in the room, Russell Wilson. Not only was he costing the team a boatload of money and playing awful football, but he was also failing in his role as a leader. Payton told Wilson that he needed to focus less on his brand, aptly summing it up by telling him, "Will you effing stop kissing all the babies? You're not running for public office." He was also quick to get rid of Russell Wilson's private office at the team facility and told him he couldn't bring in his own personal coaches. In other words, Payton had arrived, and he wasn't going to be taking any nonsense. This was a franchise that needed a firm hand, and he was more than happy to offer one. In addition to resetting the culture, Sean Payton and George Paton set about resetting another crucial element of any NFL team, the offensive line. Right tackle Mike McGlinchey was awarded a 5-year, $87.5 million deal in free agency, having come from the 49ers, and guard Ben Powers was brought in from Baltimore, earning himself a 4-year, $52 million deal. Sean Payton has won a lot of games over his time in the NFL, and he knows that good trenches are the blueprint to success, which is why the Broncos also went out and nabbed defensive end Zach Allen on a 3-year, $47.5 million deal. Linebacker Alex Singleton also joined the fray, rounding out a top-tier free agency class. Despite the success off the field in that offseason, the good vibes didn't translate immediately to on-field production. It was clear that Payton had his reservations about Russell Wilson. And, despite the quarterback having a better statistical season under the Saints legend, the marriage was short-lived. With the team sitting at 7-8 in the 2023 season, Wilson was benched by Payton, all but confirming the end of his time as the Broncos franchise quarterback. Just 2 years after signing a huge $245 million deal, the Broncos cut ties with the quarterback that was meant to lead them back to glory. Such was Payton's dislike of what the 35-year-old quarterback had to offer that the Broncos took on the largest dead money hit in the history of the game. Yep, a whopping $85 million over 2 seasons. On the plus side, sophomore defensive ends Nik Bonitto and Jonathan Cooper were making great strides on the defensive line, tying for a team-leading 9 sacks each, closely followed by new free agent signing Zach Allen with 7. Defensive coordinator Vance Joseph had been brought in as part of Payton's team takeover, and he was beginning to piece together a unit that would play a huge role in transforming the franchise's fortunes in 2024. Joseph received more help in the 2024 offseason, with safety Brandon Jones coming over from Miami, Malcolm Roach reuniting with Sean Payton to offer depth on the D-line, and Cody Barton doing the same in the linebacker room. The unit then got stronger when the Broncos traded for Jets defensive end John Franklin Myers. With the addition of these new players to an already talented group of young defenders who had developed well under Vance Joseph in their first year together, the Broncos defense became one of the most fearsome units in 2024. They transformed from the 27th best scoring defense to the 3rd best scoring defense, restricting opponents to just 18.2 points per game. Joseph's impressive array of pass rushers combined for a league-leading 63 sacks, 9 more than Baltimore in second place. Nik Bonitto led the way with 13.5, followed by Jonathan Cooper with 10.5, Zach Allen with 8, and trade acquisition John Franklin Myers with 7. These guys pressured the quarterback on 27.7% of dropbacks, which was the 2nd best in the NFL. And when you combine that with the Defensive Player of the Year Pat Surtain patrolling the secondary, you get a defense that nobody wanted to face. The exciting thing for Broncos fans, though, was that it wasn't just the defense that took significant strides forward in 2024. In his 2nd season as head coach, Sean Payton helped the Broncos become a top 10 scoring offense, and it was all thanks to one guy in particular, Bo Nix. This is where things get properly exciting for Broncos fans. Bo Nix was widely regarded as the 5th or 6th best quarterback in an incredibly talented 2024 class. It was, therefore, not a surprise to see 5 quarterbacks taken before him. What was a surprise to some, though, was that Nix heard his name called with the 12th overall pick, heading to Denver to partner up with Sean Payton. Despite many people making connections between Bo Nix's style of play and that of Drew Brees, who was Payton's partner in crime in New Orleans, not all fans were happy with the pick. Nevertheless, Payton was sold on the former Oregon signal caller from the moment he saw him throw at his pro day, picking him as the guy to finally solve the Broncos' disastrous quarterback luck. 2 games into Nix's career, however, it appeared that the worst-case scenario had struck again. Nix had looked helpless when tossing 0 touchdowns and 4 interceptions over the first 2 games of his career, both of which resulted in losses. An all-too-familiar feeling of impending doom was enveloping the Broncos' battered and bruised fan base, and both George Paton and Sean Payton's jobs were surely hanging on by a thread. But then, Bo Nix did what he had done throughout his entire career. He picked himself back up and got to work. As the season progressed, the rookie quarterback didn't just get things back on track, he shone brightly. His final stat line read 3,775 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions through the air, to go along with 430 yards and 4 more scores on the ground. His 307 passing yards and 4 touchdowns against the Falcons proved he could take over a game with his arm, and his 75 rushing yards on the ground against New Orleans proved he could take over a game with his legs. For the first time, in what felt like a very long time, the Broncos had an electrifying young talent at the sport's most important position. With Nix and Payton transforming the offense, and Vance Joseph and his young talents on defense staking their claim as one of the best units in the league, the 2024 Broncos completely blew expectations out of the water. Saddled with $53 million worth of dead cap money from Russell Wilson, this was meant to be a reset year. Instead, the Broncos earned a playoff berth for the first time in 9 seasons, and Bo Nix landed 3rd in Offensive Rookie of the Year voting. The Denver Broncos were officially back. A loss to a very talented Buffalo Bills side in the wildcard round brought an end to the season, but there was still so much reason for optimism. The defense was clearly loaded, and Bo Nix finally gave Denver a leader to build around, which is exactly what the team has done in the 2025 offseason. First-round rookie cornerback Jahdae Barron gives Vance Joseph an embarrassment of riches to work with in the secondary, especially when you consider the unit has also been bolstered by free agent safety Talanoa Hufanga. Hufanga played a huge role in making the San Francisco 49ers a dominant defensive force over the last half-decade, as did linebacker Dre Greenlaw, who also joined the Broncos in free agency. Both players are coming off injuries, but are also amongst the best at their positions when healthy. On the offensive side of things, the Broncos front office are eager to strike while the iron is hot, bringing in dynamic rookie running back RJ Harvey, who will be a menace in the passing game, and has received plenty of comps to Alvin Kamara, who dominated under Sean Payton in New Orleans. Pat Bryant then comes in as a big-bodied perimeter receiver in round 3, ready to learn from Courtland Sutton. The combination of those two wide receivers, along with the gaggle of smaller, speedier pass catchers such as Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin, and even RJ Harvey, is a very exciting prospect for Broncos fans. Rounding out the offseason additions, you have veterans Evan Engram and J.K. Dobbins. Engram is the perfect target to work with Bo Nix on passes over the middle of the field, and Dobbins adds more reliability and quality on early down runs. All in all, it is a vastly upgraded offensive unit, and one that should see Bo Nix set up for a big leap as a sophomore. Dare to dream, Broncos fans. From Super Bowl glory in early 2016 to perennial pain and eventual underdog surprise in 2024, it has been one hell of a ride for Broncos fans. Everything points towards Sean Payton, George Paton, Vance Joseph, and Bo Nix having laid the foundations for what will finally be a new era of successful football for the franchise. But what do you think? Is this the next great dynasty, or are Broncos fans in for another nasty surprise? Let us know in the comments.